1919, 1 month after the infamous Black Sox scandal of the 1919 World Series between the Chicago White Sox and the Cincinnati Reds that rocked the baseball world, when a poor rabbi/butcher named Joseph Binfer, son of Rabbi Isaac and Ida Sarah Binfer, took himself a bride, Elizabeth Bassman, a cook, daughter of Hertz and Libby Siegel Bassman, both of Orthodox Judaism. My mother was actually named after Libby's mother, her maternal great-grandmother, Goldie Siegel, and I myself was later named after my maternal great-grandfather, Hertz Bassman. Shortly thereafter, they moved to Chicago to begin a new life. Between the years of 1921 and 1933, they were blessed with 7 children, whom I like to refer to as the Magnificent Seven. Mom was very close to them all. In order of age, the oldest was Uncle Jaime, also known as Ray, born in 1921. He was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Air Corps during World War II, the Air Force during the Korean and Vietnam Wars, and was awarded with a Purple Heart. Next came her older sister Hannah, also known as Henny, as in Aunt Henny, Uncle Benny, and Cousin Kenny. She moved to Israel in about 1972 or 73, shortly after Bubby's passing, and maintained strong Jewish customs throughout her entire life. We are now still mourning the loss of Mom's kid brother Mark, who just recently passed away on April 27th, just 9 days after celebrating his 99th birthday. Uncle Mark was a remarkable man. He enlisted and served our country in the U.S. Navy, then studied architecture at IIT, where Uncle Paul, also a fantastic architect, they have a scholarship named after him, them called the Binfer Brothers. The youngest of the 7, her sister Seidel, also known as Aunt Shani, was a distinguished author, professor, and doctor of anthropology. The lone surviving sibling, Aunt Ida, by the way, happy her birthday today. Happy birthday. We are honored to have her here today. She recently moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, and was truly my mother's closest confidant and best friend. My mother was the third of the 7 born in 1923. They were all born in Chicago with the exception of my mom, who was actually born in Des Moines. The Bassmans, Bubby's family, were there, and Bubby wanted to be close to her parents when my mother was born. So she boarded the train out to Des Moines to give birth to my mother and returned back to Chicago shortly thereafter. Pa did not go, as he just stayed behind at home in Chicago waiting for the news. It's my understanding that they had an agreement whereby Pa would name the boys and Bubby would pick out the name for the girls. Mom was very dedicated and devoted to both of her parents. When it came to her father, known as Pa, his main pastime and recreation was either going to shul or staying at home learning and teaching, or else going to the nearby park and reading the Jewish newspapers. Mom enjoyed going to the movies back in those days, and her favorites were Laurel and Hardy. At one time, my mother felt that Pa should get out of the department and go to the movies himself, but he resisted, complaining that it's too hard to read the subtitles. He was unaware that the talkies came out years earlier. Mom grew up in an Orthodox environment in a 3-bedroom apartment on Douglas Boulevard on the west side of Chicago, known as Douglas Park, a predominantly Jewish neighborhood at the time. She shared a bedroom with her 3 sisters, and from what I heard, she was also known to hog the bathroom, the one bathroom that they had. My mother attended Lawson Grammar School and Marshall High School in Chicago, where she played the violin in the school's orchestra. One of her classmates at Lawson at the time coincidentally happened to be Aaron Schlesman, Amy's father, later to become her Makatanim. Singing along with dancing were 2 of her life's passions. In later years, she was heavily involved in organizing both the Lawson and Marshall school reunions. After graduating from high school, she took a job as a secretary and lived at home. While working and still living at home, as Ida mentioned at her 100th birthday celebration, she contributed half her weekly salary back to the family. Fate then came a calling in January of 1949, when shortly after turning 25, she was a member of a Jewish auxiliary group when she attended the dance to honor a person named Myra Horowitz, who was killed in World War II. Mr. Horowitz also happened to be a close friend of my father's, so my father, Dad, Victor, age 30 at the time, was at the event where he played in the band that night. During one of the breaks, he sat down at a table for something to eat and struck up a conversation with Goldie, and they hit it off at once. Before leaving for the evening, he asked her for her phone number. She told him that it's in the phone book under the name of Joseph Binfer. We also have a photo taken of them that evening on the day that they met. They then began dating, had a whirlwind romance, and 6 months later got married on a scorching hot day over 100 degrees on July 3rd, 1949 in a temple in Chicago with no air conditioning. They lived for 1 year in 1952 on the south side, as that was the year that I happened to be born at Jackson Park Hospital. That is probably what instilled in me to become a lifelong White Sox fan. Although my fandom has been very much tested and challenged during this miserable season. Afterwards, our family lived on a third-floor apartment in Albany Park on the north side of Chicago. In 1957, with 3 small sons at the time, my father somehow scraped together about $2,000 to put a down payment on a $20,000 house all the way out in Martin Grove. My parents raised 4 sons there, born between the years of 1950 and 1960, so there were 6 of us in the family. Family was the backbone of my mother's life, and the word family contained 6 letters. I don't know if it was planned that way, but all 6 of us in the family had 6 letters in our first names. Mom had lived in the same house in Morton Grove for the past 66 years and 6 months, the last 22 independently since Dad's passing in September of 2001, unless you count Joey hanging out there in the basement intermittently throughout the years. My parents were married for 52 wonderful years until Dad's passing. It was not the perfect marriage, but they were perfect for each other. Throughout the years, my mother loved activities such as jazzercise, bowling, mahjong, bridge, and canasta. She played Maj on Monday nights with the same group of women for about 40 years. She did not gamble unless you count gambling for 10 cents, but she, in her later years, turned out to be a real card shark. We all went to Hebrew school at Skokie Valley Traditional Synagogue in Skokie. I actually didn't mind going as long as we could stop off at Big Herm's afterwards for hot dog and fries, which were about 25 cents at the time. For many years, Mom was heavily involved in the synagogue sisterhood, where one time she served as president, as well as headed its bowling team. She belonged to many bowling leagues throughout the years and kept active in bowling until her mid-90s. Another highlight of her life was back in 1982, when Mom was a contestant in the Mrs. Illinois Beauty Contest, which happened to be held in Skokie. She was 58 years old at the time, and probably about 25 to 30 years senior of most of her competition. She did not win, but was voted by other contestants as Miss Congeniality. Mom was a beautiful person, both inside and out, and her penmanship was impeccable. Mom was also a sports enthusiast. She loved all Chicago sports teams. As long as the jersey said Chicago on it, she rooted for them. Although as far as the NFL is concerned, I would have thought that with her initials that she would become a Packers fan. She followed the Bulls dynasty back in the 90s very closely and knew all the players and coaches. Of her 4 children, I probably became the biggest sports fan. I remember one time while growing up as a kid, I was at home watching the end of a closely played Sox game. She wanted me to do some sort of a chore, like asking me to carry out the garbage. I told her that I can't, it's wait until the game is over. She then said that she thinks that I care more about baseball than I do for the family. I told her maybe so, but I care for the family more than either football or hockey. It didn't really happen, just a little levity here. My mother was the rock of the family, always planning family events, then looking forward to the next one. My father did not particularly like to travel, but he was happy to do so along with my mother, whether to go to New York, California, Texas, or Minnesota with my mother for either family bar, or bat mitzvah, or wedding. Family was everything to Mom, along with living without conflict and peace and harmony. She assembled memory books for my dad and Jerry respectively when they each passed away, along with those of her siblings. One of her happiest and proudest moments of her life was the first weekend of November 1984 at the age of 60, when she became a grandmother for the first time with births of my nephew Michael and daughter Lauren, born one day apart. Additional grandchildren came later, and then she became a great-grandmother in her 90s with the additions of Theo, Bryce, Ari, and Reese. She always remembered all of their birthdays. In conclusion, we are grateful that she lived past the age of 100 with all her faculties still intact, along with the quality of life that she led up until the end. Mom, we will miss you dearly and remember you with admiration and reverence. May your memory, wisdom, spirit, inspiration, and living shall be passed down in the family for generations to come. I love you.
It was only about a week ago that I was with my mom one-on-one. We had some quiet time at this particular point, and she leaned forward in her chair, signaled for me to come closer. I looked in her eyes, I'll never forget this, and she said these 5 words to me: "Did you mail my letters?" This was classic Goldie. So loving, but at the same time, her mind and attention to details was incredible. Countless people had the pleasure of being in the company of my mom, not just in recent years, but throughout my life. And they look at me and say, "Your mother is amazing." I go, I know. What can I say? So how does one capture a life that's so complete, a lifetime spanning 100 years in just a couple of minutes? Well, you don't. Not when it comes to Goldie. I wouldn't even try. This is a woman who charted her own path, wrote her own script, and followed that script to a T, all the way to this moment and beyond, actually, because I know there's still more chapters to be written in the Goldie script in the days, years, and generations that follow. So what was Goldie's legacy? What was her secret to longevity? I don't really know. It's truly baffling. I know it had nothing to do with diet. This lady ate whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. There wasn't a cookbook or nutrition magazine to be found near the kitchen. Healthy balance in her meal did not exist for the most part. So from now on, for me, for my breakfast, it's a Pop-Tart sprinkled with bridge mix and topped off with a Mounds bar. I should be fine. But perhaps it was her easygoing demeanor. I can recall while growing up, Mom was the one that I'd always go to when I needed a hug, a reassuring smile, a promise that everything would be okay.